He used to pass mirrors without blinking, not out of confidence, but because he couldn't bear to see what was left. Once, Isaac Fernandez was the kind of man who filled a room, calloused hands, loud laugh, unshakable presence. But all it took was one fire, one instant, to change everything he saw in himself. He survived, but barely recognized the man he'd become. He stopped taking photos, stopped smiling in public, stopped showing up to the parts of life that required being seen. Not because of how he looked, but because of what he believed, that his reflection no longer deserved a witness. But someone saw him anyway, not a therapist, not a stranger, his daughter. She didn't tell him she was painting him, didn't ask him to pose. She simply picked up a brush and painted the father she still remembered, the man he used to be, the man she never stopped seeing. And when he saw that painting, everything began to change. How do you bring someone back to life? Without saying a word. Sometimes you don't need to fix a person. You just need to reflect the parts of them they forgot were still there. This is the story of a man who couldn't face his scars until his daughter made him believe he was worth looking at again. Before the fire, Isaac Fernandez was everywhere. Backyard barbecues, little league sidelines, holiday dinners with too many stories. He wasn't just a dad, he was the glue, the kind of man who fixed everything with a screwdriver, a joke, or a bear hug. But fire doesn't ask who you were, it just takes. It happened in seconds. An apartment blaze, an instinct to help the neighbors upstairs. He got them out, but he didn't come back the same. The skin on his face, arms, neck changed. The man in the hospital mirror was unfamiliar, not just marked, but foreign. He didn't scream, didn't cry, just stopped. Stopped going out in daylight, stopped attending PTA meetings, stopped picking up a paintbrush, which he once used to help Luna with her school projects. His wife had passed years earlier. Now it was just him and his daughter, but even with her, he began to retreat. He'd wake before Luna, wrap a towel around the bathroom mirror, and get through the day without looking, because looking meant remembering, and remembering meant pain. Even his voice grew quieter, his presence dimmer, the man who used to sing while washing dishes now barely left his room. He didn't think he was depressed. He thought he was protecting her from the man he'd become, from the reflection he couldn't handle. But Luna didn't need the version of him he used to be. She just needed her dad. The one who tucked her in with stories, who danced like a fool to 90s music, who showed up, and somehow she knew. If he couldn't face the mirror, maybe he could face something else, something made of love, something made by her. She didn't tell him what she was doing, didn't announce it, but while he was disappearing, she was painting him back into the world, one quiet brush stroke at a time. Luna Fernandez was only 13, but she saw more than most adults ever did. She saw what her father didn't say, saw how he flinched when his reflection caught him off guard, saw how he walked a little smaller each day, like he was trying to take up less space in the world. And so she started watching him, not out of pity, but out of memory. She remembered his laugh, the way he used to whistle off-key while flipping pancakes, the deep, calming hum in his chest when she leaned into him during thunderstorms. He was still there, just buried, and she missed him. One evening, while he sat by the window, reading, or at least pretending to, she sketched him. At first it was simple, rough outlines, closed eyes, the curve of his jaw that still looked like home. She didn't show him. Not yet, because this wasn't for school. This wasn't for art class. This was her way of holding on. The sketches turned into paintings. At night, after homework, she'd paint quietly under her lamp, using colors that felt like him: deep browns, soft amber, a brush of gold across the scars. Not to erase them, but to make them sacred. She didn't need him to be who he was. She just needed him to know he was still her dad. Still good, still whole, still here. So she painted every day for a month. One canvas, one face, a face full of stories, full of pain, yes, but also full of worth. She wasn't fixing him. She was remembering him back into the light. And one morning, without warning, she left the painting beside the mirror, the very one he hadn't looked into for over a year. What happened next? Neither of them could have expected. It was a Saturday morning, overcast, quiet. Isaac moved through the house like he always did, careful not to make noise, careful not to be seen, but something felt different. When he entered the bathroom, the towel was missing from the mirror, and in its place, on the counter beneath it, a single painting, canvas, portrait, him, but not the version he saw in his nightmares, not the fragmented man he thought he'd become. This was him as Luna saw him: eyes gentle, posture strong, scars visible but dignified, bathed in warm light. It wasn't fantasy, it was truth. His daughter's truth. He stood there for a long time, hands shaken, eyes unable to blink. At first he wanted to turn away, to reject it, to say, "That's not me." But Luna's handwriting was on the back. One line: "If you can't see yourself yet, let me show you what I never stopped seeing." That's when the first tear fell, not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Because for the first time in so long, he didn't feel invisible. He didn't feel like damage control. He felt seen, not by a crowd, not by strangers, by the one person whose opinion could still reach him: his daughter. He didn't say much that day, just walked out into the living room, held the painting in one hand, and opened his other arm. Luna stepped into it without a word, and for the first time in months, he held her without shame. That moment didn't fix everything. It didn't erase the pain, but it cracked the door open to healing. And from that small opening, a new kind of light began to pour in. What came next wasn't easy, but it was real. And it started with a canvas, a mirror, and a girl who never gave up. Healing didn't roar in like a storm. It crept in, soft as sunlight through curtains. In the small decisions Isaac made each day. The next morning, he didn't cover the mirror. He didn't stare long, but he looked, just for a moment. And it was enough. He walked Luna to the bus stop again, not behind sunglasses, not in hiding. The neighbor smiled. He nodded back. That night, he helped her mix paints for a school project. His hands still unsure, but present. The radio was playing. He hummed. It wasn't the old Isaac. It was a man learning how to stand in the world again. He called his sister, joined a support group, started volunteering at a local center for burn survivors, not as a speaker, just as a listener. Because he knew now, sometimes all a person needs is for someone to sit beside them and say, "I get it, you're not alone." He even picked up a paintbrush again. One weekend, he and Luna painted a second portrait, together, not of him, but of the two of them, side by side, laughing. He didn't flinch when she added the scar along his cheek. Didn't ask her to hide it. He said, "It's part of the story, don't blur it out, make it bold." That's the thing about rising. It doesn't erase the fall. it reclaims it. He wasn't trying to be the man he was becoming the man his daughter already believed he could be. And in doing so, he became something even stronger. What Isaac didn't realize was that his quiet courage, his willingness to be seen again, would soon echo far beyond his own home. It started with one painting, but the ripples carried far. The school hosted a spring art showcase. Luna submitted the original portrait, the one she painted in secret. She didn't think much of it, didn't expect it to win anything, but people stopped in front of it and stayed. A mother whispered, "My son covers all the mirrors at home." A teacher blinked back tears and said, "This reminds me of my brother." The painting didn't just depict Isaac, it held up a mirror to everyone who'd ever felt unworthy of being seen. A local journalist picked up the story, then a podcast, then a burn survivors network asked to share it in their newsletter. Suddenly, Isaac was receiving emails from fathers, veterans, teenagers, women who'd lost their hair to chemo, all of them saying the same thing. "Thank you for letting us see ourselves through your courage." He never saw himself as brave. He just kept showing up to the support group, to Luna's art nights, to life. But his choice to step back into the light, scars and all, gave others permission to do the same. He was invited to speak at a community center. He almost said no, but Luna squeezed his hand and said, "Just tell them what the painting meant to you." So he did, not as a hero, not as a victim, but as a father who found his reflection in his daughter's eyes and decided to believe in it. People would continue to reach out, not because his story was perfect, but because it was real, the kind that lingers, the kind that shows you healing isn't loud, it's seen. Ask those who met Isaac after the painting, and you'll hear a chorus of gratitude, not for grand speeches, but for the way he simply stood in his truth. Each person saw in him a part of themselves. Maria was a burn survivor, like Isaac, just younger. She met him at a community event. Maria said, "He didn't look away from me, and when I asked if the stares ever stop hurting, he said, 'Not always, but they stop deciding who you are.'" That was the first time I believed I could walk through a crowd again. Mr. Hernandez taught art at Luna's school for 17 years. He had seen a lot of student talent, but Luna's painting made him pause. Mr. Hernandez said, "I've seen technically perfect pieces, but that portrait, it had a soul. It taught my students more about humanity than any lesson plan ever could." Jamil was a veteran who had isolated himself for almost a decade. His daughter showed him Isaac's story online. Jamil said, "I didn't think I had the right to be seen until I saw a man who looked like he'd lost more than me. Standing beside his daughter, smiling, it made me call mine. That call changed everything." And Luna, quietly proud, always observant, she said the most powerful thing of all. Luna said, "I didn't paint him to fix him. I painted him because I missed him, and I wanted him to see what I saw. Now he does, and I got my dad back." Each voice different, each moment small, but together they echo the same truth. Sometimes it takes just one person to help you see yourself again. Isaac never put the towel back over the mirror, not once, but even more than that. He never took down the painting. It still hangs in the hallway outside his bedroom, framed in simple wood, painted in quiet faith. He walks by it every morning and every night. Sometimes he still winces, old habits die hard, but now, when he catches his reflection, he sees more than skin. He sees a father who showed up, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. He sees the strength behind the scars and the girl who painted him into belief. Luna went on to study art therapy, and Isaac, he became a regular at school art shows, shaking hands, smiling for photos, encouraging kids who felt invisible. He still doesn't lack attention, still prefers the back row, but when a child hesitates to show their work, he leans down and says, "Let them see it. You never know who needs it." The painting didn't just bring him back to life, it gave him something to live into. A future with color, with story, with truth. And in the end, that canvas wasn't just about him. It was about every person who's ever needed to be seen before they could start to heal. Some stories heal with noise, this one healed with color and quiet presence, because sometimes the people we love can't hear words, but they can feel when we stay. And sometimes the mirror lies until someone holds up a better one. If you've ever looked away from your own reflection, if you've ever needed someone to remind you of your worth, let this story stay with you. And if you've been that reminder for someone else, thank you. We need more of you. Leave a comment and tell us who saw you when you couldn't see yourself, or who did you show up for when they were hiding? And if this story moved you, share it with someone you love, someone who might need a different kind of mirror. Subscribe for more stories that speak to the soul. Stories about resilience, reconnection, and rediscovery. Because healing doesn't always happen in hospitals. Sometimes it starts with a paintbrush and a daughter who refused to let her father disappear.